Just in time for fall, it looks like. Though I don't know if I'll make the deadline or end up pulling a Dr. Wolfula this year. One mental shattering and warning from the higher-ups later. Turns out linking to Toro's website wasn't a smart idea on my last video. Let's get back to regular programming. Spooky, scary shit. And like before, a game I've never played. Fatal Frame. Thank Cybernet again, as my first exposure to the Tecmo developed series comes from there. Sooner or later I'm gonna have to hit all the classics I've seen from that funny little X-Play prototype, so look forward to whenever I do Killer 7 or Stranger's Wrath. All I can really say here is that most of what I know about Fatal Frame comes from my adolescent experience with the aforementioned Cybernet and the prevailing word of mouth claiming the series to be the scariest out of a lot of horror games. I mean, the lads at 4Player Podcast got startled out of their chairs during a playthrough, so why not toss my amorphous hand into the ring? Two starting points for this one, Tecmo's Deception, Invitation to Darkness, and Silent Hill. I already gave it away that the developer for Fatal Frame was the former Tecmo, now Koei Tecmo, developer of Dead or Alive, Ninja Gaiden, and Captain Tsubasa. Oh, and Monster Rancher for those few fans out there, as you're more punished than Pokemon and Digimon diehards combined. Anyway, if you haven't played the PlayStation 1 cult classic, Tecmo's Deception is a hybrid between Night Trap and a first-person RPG. But instead of wanting to protect teens, 20-year-olds acting as teens, you do the exact opposite in Deception. You're the one trying to entrap or kill those trying to invade the player character's place of dwelling. Since this isn't a retrospective on Deception, I'll skip the preamble on the rest of the game. I trust you can find some form of content that can elucidate you more on the subject and bring up a member of the game's team. Makoto Shibata. Shibata's start in the industry is a bit of an odd one, at least on one front. His first two gigs were for Deception, both as a planner and voice talent. You usually don't think of development pulling double duty for voicing except in either the case of no budget, see the first 3 Thief games or even Chaos Wars, or as a neat little Easter egg, such as Sakurai taking on the role of DDD in Smash Brawl. Most of the time it's the former rather than the latter, as I will acknowledge that while voice work has its place in the video game ecosystem, gameplay does take the pressing matter. And that's not to say that it's a bad thing when interns or staff go into the booth. Again, see Thief, or for the low-hanging fruit, Ride to Hell Retribution. Back on topic, Shibata's wheels started spinning after his work for Deception, an ideal formulating in his brain that wouldn't be acted upon until 5 years after that game's 1996 release. So what did he do in the meantime? A testing role for Mega Man Legends. Another planning role for 2001's Gallop Racer, 2001, stepping up to main planner for 98's Deception 2 and writer-director for 99's Deception 3, and serving as a debugger for 98's Chameleon Twist 2. You can see why he got his own franchise to work on as he climbed the development ladder to become the face of Deception, having enough sway to implement his ideas with the credibility to back them up. Before I continue, tangent-wise, Shibata also worked on a few films, the one catching my eye being Pokemon Forever, where he was in charge of optical effects, whatever that means. And if you're scratching your head, no, that isn't the one where Ash falls in love with Latias. That's Heroes. Forever has the Celebi tree golem. Also, Heroes has Annie and Oakley, who will forever be overshadowed by Latias GF, making me sad. Where was I?
Koei Tecmo, Monster Rancher, Pokemon.
The time frame of 1999 to 2001. The showcasing and subsequent release of our Lord and Savior, the PlayStation 2. Hallowed be its name, for it brings salvation to those who worship its vaunted library. Dick-sucking aside, I specify this time period as it was around then that hardware kits were delivered to developers to begin working on titles for the fresh-faced console. One of them Tecmo. In an interview with PlayStation's official blog, Shibata describes the beginning steps of development for Fatal Frame as such. The initial project kicked off under the Project Zero codename when the PlayStation 2 development tools were first made available back at the time. When the PlayStation 2 hardware came out with dramatically improved graphical capabilities, we took a different approach by keeping the game system and play experience simple. we tried to emotionally reach out to players and get them to feel things they couldn't actually see on screen. This is where that second jumping off point rears its head. That mentality is one of the design philosophies of Silent Hill. Essentially, and I hate using this term, smart horror. I'm sorry, I have a supreme dislike of people creating terms like smart horror or throwing around the phrase deconstruction without understanding anything about a genre. Personal annoyance aside, Silent Hill also proved that horror games no longer had to rely upon pre-rendered backgrounds to create a world. 3D modeling was the way to go. Continuing with the PlayStation blog interview, Shibata goes on to say that the initial research of the new PlayStation 2 hardware led us to the conclusion that we would be able to recreate some of the ways I experienced seeing things in real life. Also, the existence of Silent Hill was beneficial for us in seeing how well Polygon-created horrors were accepted by the players. As a result, our task was to take it a step further and get players to feel things they couldn't see on screen, recreating that uncountable feeling one tends to experience in certain rooms and locations like in real life. Joining Shibata for development was much of the Deception team, particularly programmer and chief design director Keisuke Kikuchi, who switched over to a producer role for Project Zero, Takasaki Toshiyuki, who was the chief programmer for Deception 3, and Shigekio Okuda, the composer for Deception 1. Borrowing a pull quote from Grimoire of Horror's retrospective on Fatal Frame, Kikuchi explains his choice of going through the Project Zero idea with, "I think that fear is an emotion that everybody shares. I thought that this might allow more people to enjoy it and so chose the theme of fear. In the past, I worked on the Deception series, whose selling point was its dark atmosphere and new game system, but for the time being, we had done all we could with that series, so I wanted to try pushing the theme of fear further, and that's how it began." For a bit of a pop culture rewind, thank you OSW for a spiffy little phrase, popular on the big and little screens of Japan was horror, what we Americans would call J-horror. From Oda Quest's J-horror retrospective, the origin of what is traditionally considered J-horror can be traced to the early 1990s with straight-to-video and made-for-TV anthologies like True Scary Stories that exists as just one example of a glut of low-budget horror made for home consumption to satiate growing consumption needs that arose with the growing home video market. Stories like these look much further back in Japan's history for the storytelling inspiration that drove these works. The likes of Ju-on or Ringu are the prime examples, though as Oda Quest mentions, J-horror is practically a label for Kaidan storytelling, as the likes of Mike's Audition and Ichi the Killer are separated from the discussion of the genre despite having roots in Japan's horror boom. Kaidan is what we Westerners would call ghost stories or urban legends, with the term usually referring to Edo period Japan. It's a blending of the old and new with ancient or supernatural elements encroaching on modern life, like say the curses from Ju-on or Ringu, or the ghosts from Pulse. As Oda Quest says, the J-horror boom was defined by a string of films that sought to comment on Japan's post-World War II modernization and the impacts of technology on interpersonal communication. By commenting on how technology challenged Japanese tradition and how this reflected on society, the best films in the genre are able to use horror conventions to more widely discuss how modernization was fracturing society and human connection. In the case of another popular J-horror film from the time, 2001's Pulse. I know this detour might seem random. I'm a game guy, not a film guy, but Shibata was thinking along the same lines as many popular modern Kaidan tales like what I've mentioned above, watching a number of Japanese horror and World War II films. Back to Grimoire, Shibata provides a bit of insight into Project Zero's design with the following. Japanese houses have things like the shadows of sliding doors under the floor, attics, and the like that have this darkness that seems like something is lurking inside it, right? We made it in a Japanese style because I wanted to show that darkness. It seems to me that the emotions of the people who have been there have seeped into these wooden Japanese houses. Meager happiness, small sentimentalities, terrible memories, all of it. When I immerse myself in that darkness, I feel as though the memories of the deceased are secretly whispering to me. In making this game, we put a lot of attention into creating the rooms so that you could imagine the events of the past from the various remnants lingering there. As you explore the rooms thoroughly, wondering what happened there, I want you to listen out for whispers from the darkness. Thus, the setting for the game was a classical Japanese mansion that Shibata had originally designed for deception, but it didn't fit within that franchise's aesthetic. Essentially, rural enough where the likes of 1980s technology, the time period in which the game would take place in, wouldn't work, leaving our sibling duo of Miku and Mafuyu Hinasaka stranded in a haunting ground. One of the key proponents of the gamescape was its sound, taking advantage of stereophonic sound, or as we know it now, the stereo option in the sound settings of most games. Shigekio explains his choice in the sound production for Project Zero on Tecmo's official website with, "When this project started, stereophonic sound was one of the sound concepts. I remember having a hard time figuring out how to make the user feel stereophonic sound in the beginning. After trying various commercially available tools and third-party middleware, we chose Arnis sound technology because of the nature of the game. We considered the importance of 3D movement between left and right sounds. If you listen with headphones, you'll understand, but the movie scenes where Crimson walks down the corridor, combined with the sound effects, will make you feel like you're walking there." This became such an important aspect that as part of the promotional campaign, headphones were given away to lucky lottery winners through the Japanese store Tsutaya, a bit like bloodvertising, only dramatically less stupid. Perhaps the retroactively funniest part about the development of Project Zero/Fatal Frame is that, originally, the camera obscura wasn't in the original version of the game. Instead, Shibata and Kikuchi wanted the players to repel ghosts with light. Kikuchi was resistant to the idea of the camera obscura when it was pitched, but went along with it after Shibata brought up the mythology of cameras in relation to superstition. From Tecmo's official website, Shibata phrases it as such. There are many legends such as the camera being a psychic photograph or moving to the center and the soul being pulled out. Seeing a December 13th, 2001 release date after a delay, Project Zero hit Japanese store shelves while we got it over here in America on March 8th, 2002 under the title Fatal Frame. Originally on the PlayStation 2, it was then later re-released on the Xbox in 2002 for America, 2003 everywhere else, as Fatal Frame Special Edition including graphical updates, new ghosts, and the Fatal Difficulty mode. The game then saw a PlayStation 3 store release on April 9th, 2013 in America. The version I will be playing is the original PlayStation 2 release, as that is the one I'm familiar with from Cybernet, using of course PCS X2 as my emulator. There was a bit of a recording snafu, as in I lost a little bit of the last night, rescuing young Kyrie to re-entering the shrine for the finale, due to a weird glitch within OBS, so if you see footage that isn't mine during story, that explains that. Our story begins with a preamble. Miku, via narration, informs us that she and her brother Mafuyu, her only living relative, have the curse of clairvoyance, and that he disappeared about 2 weeks ago at a location called Himuro Manor. A haunted mansion to be exact, as we see what happened to Mafuyu on the night he vanished. By the way, he was looking for his friend the novelist Junsei Takamine and his team, who also disappeared within the estate. Suffice it to say, the investigation team is dead, with Miku confirming that as she runs into their ghosts when she goes to search for her brother, the only memento of his left laying around being a camera. The camera obscura. With the power to exorcise ghosts, Miku uncovers a bit more of why Takamine chose Himuro Mansion. Its history is quite bloody, with a massacre occurring that killed off the entire family. Oh, and that whatever was the cause of the familicide has inflicted a curse on the land, binding the still living with intangible ropes until all 5 limbs are wrapped, leading to death by dismemberment and the newly departed taking up residence as another vengeful soul. See, the Himuro family practice a number of odd rituals, 2 of them being the strangling ritual, the other the blinding ritual, that led to a previous investigation by Ryozo Munakata leading to the death of his wife Yae because their daughter Makoto disappeared. Because of ghosts. Makoto is the grandmother of Miku and Mafuyu, connecting the two to the horrors of the Himuro as she accidentally found the camera obscura and gave it to Yae and Ryozo. Yae committed suicide due to the ghostly connections now tormenting her, while Ryozo was slain by the spirits as he attempted to appease them with the power of a sacred mirror that has been broken into fifths. Finding pieces of the mirror while also uncovering the truths of the Himuro, Miku finds out that the binding and strangling ritual work in tandem. Maidens are selected as sacrifices for both rituals, the maiden chosen for the blinding ritual having her eyes gouged out via a special mask, while the maiden chosen for the strangling ritual is isolated from any human contact, as retainers and priests had to wear masks so that the maiden didn't form any personal connections, to prime her for her role before she's carted off and dismembered through rope pulling.
Stop.
The reason for the hauntings is because the last rope maiden, Kyrie Himuro, botched her duty, torn between it and her love for a random passerby. With her mind split between two aspects, the forces of the literal hellmouth below the mansion were able to break free, shattering the sacred mirror of Himuro before possessing Lord Himuro and throwing him into a murderous bloodlust. He butchered most of the family until he came to his senses and went through with Sudoku, while Kyrie became the centerfold of the haunting, infecting anyone who enters the premises with the rope curse. Yet the Malice, the name of the Hellmouth spirits, only has control of Kyrie's body, not her complete spirit, allowing a splinter to coalesce in the shape of a younger Kyrie who guides Miku into finding the mirror shards. One climactic battle later with the malformed Kyrie, where the camera obscura breaks to reveal it was holding the last mirror piece, Miku rescues both Kyrie and Mafuyu, who both stay behind to seal the Hellmouth, ending the story with all the spirits of the manor being released.
Mafuyu, thank goodness. Don't forget your duty. My duty is to keep this gate closed. this gate to me. The rest of you, hurry and escape.
But what about you?
I must stop the calamity, or else it will happen again. Don't worry about me. You must go.
Not for you. Come on.
Miku. I must stay.
What are you saying?
I think I can help her. Miku, you go on without me. Miku. The whole time Kirei was guiding me, I could hear her screaming. Screaming for help. As the Rope Shrine Maiden, she was destined to seal the gate. Yet she also wanted to be with the one she loved. But she couldn't have both, and was being torn apart by those two feelings, which resulted in the calamity. Her spirit was touched by the malice, and she became a creature that wanted to make others suffer as she had. Now free of the malice, she is about to fulfill her duty as the Rope Shrine Maiden. Her soul must remain here, keeping this gate sealed off for all eternity. All alone. Endless pain. As long as she is free of pain, as long as she is not left hopeless, I wish to be by her side. Miku.
That was more flippant than usual, mostly because there's a lot of file reading in this game, and a number of story sequences are literal flashbacks experienced by Miku, leading to a shot-for-shot recap kinda being superfluous. Like, here's a ghost introduction, kinda makes up the bulk of the cutscenes, and the story is told backwards in that you always uncover more plot not by direct character interaction, but by the flashbacks. One of the few times my video structure fails me, and I have to call it on the fly. Anyway, I think it is safe to say that if you have any experience with traditional Onryo tales, Fatal Frame's rendition of it won't surprise you. That isn't a negative when you look back on the game's development, merely an observation, as these types of stories follow a typical pipeline. Usually someone dies in an advanced stage of grief or anguish, leading to repercussions felt by everyone who winds up involved with the curse. I will say Fatal Frame leans more towards Ju-on than Ringu, as Kyrie's haunting isn't transmittable like a virus. It's centralized to Himuro Manor, though she does adopt Sadako's background of tragedy. Torn between love and duty, she was never able to fulfill either, leading to the botched ritual and the opening of a Hellmouth teamed with malice. That's where Fatal Frame hits a bit different, the inclusion of other outside supernatural elements. There are grander forces at play, not just the grief of our lonesome Onryo. It adds an extra layer of sadness to Kyrie's plight, as essentially her spirit is being puppeteered by this negative clump of energy as it revives all the nastiness that went on around the haunting grounds. And by that very nature, the strangling ritual is fleshed out as this almost necessary evil lest the calamity hurls the world into the next dark age. In saying this, the whole of Himuro Manor is a dwelling ground for batshit insanity, as the land is a host to generational trauma, and that's even before Lord Himuro went insane and started beheading people. There's the aforementioned steps of the strangling ritual, which includes selecting young girls as sacrifices and isolating them from others upwards of 10 years, with the only contact they get from people being in the shape of masked retainers so they can't form any bonds with those preparing the ritual. All these maidens have are their thoughts, and the priests are told not to treat them like people. At best, the maidens are an object meant to be used and thrown away, causing quite a bit of mental discomfort for those not named Himuro. That leads to the blinding/demon tag ritual performed in conjunction with the strangling/rope ritual. As opposed to suffering dismemberment, those chosen to weaken the demons at the Hellmouth have their eyes gouged out. Barbaric doesn't even begin to describe it. Why do you think Long Arms exists? He dared oppose his daughter's selection for the strangling ritual, leading to his death at the hands of the family. So even before the botch, the Himuros aren't cast in a good light. Due to their barbarity and blunder, they wind up getting a slew of other people killed as well, like with most of the Munakatas and the investigation team. Each ghost tells a story, as continuing from Long Arms, he's the reason for why the demon tag children haunt the abode. Hell, while I didn't play the Xbox version, the added ghost Tokitada Kyuki, otherwise known as the Armored Warrior, was ordered to commit seppuku when he fell in love with one of the maidens, conversely leading to him appearing in Kyrie's dreams in order to goad her into failing the ritual. The Wandering Monk is a case of a good Samaritan caught in the crossfire, as he wanted to exorcise the spirits of the mansion only to become another victim. Miku and Mafuyu are just two more sufferers thrown onto the pile. Makoto's finding of the camera obscura all that time ago is what led the brother and sister to the events of today. One tiny ripple caused a torrent of agony, burdening the Hinasakas with their clairvoyance. What really makes this all come together is how the story is framed. You're venturing back in time during each night. Night 1 is current events, the disappearance of Mafuyu and the investigation team. 2 is the Minakatas and the blinding ritual. 3 Kyrie and the maiden ritual. You work from the furthest point out to the center, a reverse ripple, the effect before the cause. Because of this, each night not only brings its own mysteries, but layers together to form a solid tale all around with a few interesting curveballs. That takes the shape of the time difference between Miku and Mafuyu. All those bro shadows aren't because he's dead, it's the time displacement within the cursed zone. She's actually witnessing his events as they played out before Miku arrived. Same can be said for all the other non-violent ghosts, though in their case they're merely acting out the events of their lives before their deaths. Breaking my usual pattern, I'm going to begin with sound first, as, wow, Fatal Frame has some of the best sound directing I've ever heard, and not just in the, oh, this sounds crisp, or the emotion of terror or dread is captured well kind of way. Sound plays a huge part in both detecting and fighting ghosts, as it's projected from wherever it's generating from. If a ghost is moaning from your left, it's right there. There's no deliberate sound trickery whenever you face off against a ghost, making your ears your biggest advantage when sending the spirits back off to the afterlife. The Doppler effect is working overtime for this game. In that same breath, Fatal Frame is not afraid of going deathly quiet to enhance the mood. Little sounds far off in the distance become agonizing as you can't tell if it's just the settling of the mansion or something far more insidious. While the various grudges are the immediate threat, the estate itself plays a passive long con, whittling you and your sanity down with its odd creaks and distant whines, playing a duo to ornate if bizarre architecture. While there is music within the game, it takes a backseat to the supremely lonely ambience, broken up only by the haunting wails of the damned. The only misstep with the audio section of the presentation is the dub. Could be a case of poor directing or performances, but line delivery is stilted in that early 2000s way. Not to the highest highs of the Yakuza dub or Devil May Cry 1 or the lowest lows of Chaos Wars. Somewhere in the middle where it isn't too distracting and doesn't bring the whole mood down, but it is noticeable for how odd it can be at times. File this one under play the undub if you can, yet picking up that slack is the visual design, both on the mansion and ghosts. Even in its heyday, Himuro Estate is this lavish yet frightening amalgam of hard traditionalism, having the cover of a typical Edo era or earlier mansion hiding the frightening mask room, the grotesque Buddha room, and the underground hellmouth. What appears to be standard affair like what you would find in a place of the time takes on a double meaning when you begin to uncover the secrets of the Himuro. The rope hallway plus the inclusion of full body length mirrors in many of the corridors allude to how fanatical the family is. This only aids in the overwhelming trepidation you feel when shuffling through the various hallways, duty rooms, and ritual sites. Like, simply walking down one of the many straightaways that line the mansion with the only background music being the natural sound of the surroundings is well beyond eerie. That at any moment something could jump out is a pox constantly on the mind. And to go even further, you see the place age in reverse, as Night 1 has the Himuro Estate a rundown dump, only for Night 2 to refurbish some of its rooms. The best part about that is that nothing in the game directly tells you this aspect. You find out firsthand. Exploring the fireplace room in the prologue in Night 1, you see that an extra set of stairs has rotted away due to time. Come Night 2, those stairs exist, which is such a neat non-verbal story cue. Extending even further, the ghosts steal the show design-wise. This won't be the last time I mention this exact phrase, but all of them tell a story of who they are, how they died, and how they actively haunt. Even the very nature of Kyrie's dilemma can be discerned by the existence of the young girl in the white kimono. It implies that whatever has grasped onto Kyrie isn't exactly what she is like. In short, a monster or otherworldly force has twisted her frame into a vicious Onryo. My only complaint here, more a nitpick, is that Mafuyu and Miku don't stand out all that much. They aren't poorly designed, just plain. The ghosts were clearly the top billing, and it shows. All in all, Fatal Frame is a giant in the presentation department, having some of the best usages of game audio I've ever heard, with some delightfully creepy spirits haunting around. Fatal Frame is a combination third-person, first-person survival horror with a slight emphasis on puzzle solving and item collection. A little bit of Resident Evil and Silent Hill mixed together as you explore a centralized location a la Resi, but have the fighting and movement capabilities of an untrained civvy akin to Hill. No joke, what will probably catch your attention first when booting up the game is how slow the characters move. The normal walk speed is somewhere between Continental Drift and the heat death of the universe, while running is only slightly better. To offset this, Fatal Frame, at least for its set control type, you can change your controls within the config menu, doesn't limit the player with tank controls. Where you point the control stick is where Mafuyu and Miku move, barring when the camera position changes within a room. Think Devil May Cry as you keep moving in the direction you last were when the camera shifts in larger rooms. Speaking of camera, Fatal Frame uses a fixed one but does allow for first-person exploration with the selling point of the game, the camera obscura. Before heading down to how combat in this game works, Fatal Frame is separated into 4 chapters called Nights, where standard level progression is by way of solving puzzles and fighting items. Of course, Fatal Frame has its own spin in the form of the talisman doors. Doors might be locked via a ghost's power, requiring you to take a picture of the door to find out where the spirit is hiding, so you can snap a shot of it to burn the talisman. Hidden key items are also found in the same manner, such as the bronze key for the locked safe, and some puzzle elements, when framed, will show the correct solution, as in the case for the candle puzzle, or that an object isn't really there, like with the blocked door that introduces the puzzling of the game. Completing a night involves surviving an assortment of battles and brain teasers within the manor, and each night brings new enemies, puzzles, pathways, and notebooks to find that elaborate on what happened. The time shenanigans of the estate isn't just for show. Certain areas of the manor are inaccessible from previously used doorways on later nights. A simple run to the Cherry Atrium might become a long trudge, as suddenly an exit no longer works. The manor is very much a threat in of itself, and that's not even getting started on the ghosts. To aid your journey, there are a number of pickups that will ease your traversal, these being the healing items, spirit stones, and film. Health comes in 3 shapes: herbal medicine, sacred water, and stone mirrors. Herbal medicine heals for around half your health, while sacred water fully recovers any damage you took. A stone mirror, meanwhile, is an instant revive in the off chance you die. As such, you can only hold 1 mirror, while I don't think there is an upward limit to the other 2 items, besides how many there actually are in the mansion. Film comes in 4 types: 14, 37, 74, and 90, with the limit on each being 99 exposures. Only 14 can be replenished at saves, and that's when that type dips below 30. Saving doesn't require the usage of a special item like ink ribbons. You just need to find the photo boxes to do so, though save rooms aren't safe rooms. That's because every enemy is a ghost, so the laws of doors or walls don't affect them. They can and will chase you down to the ends of the earth, and some mandatory ghosts lock you in the room you face them in. Note the mandatory last sentence. Ghost attacks are a combination of required and random. While a cutscene usually plays for these set encounters, merely exploring the mansion can lead to an unplanned scuffle. These extra fights can occur almost anywhere, and I think there's a time element to when one gets sent your way, but to lessen the burden, each night has a selection of ghosts picked to be sent to hassle you. Night 1 might see you tussle with Broken Neck a few times, while nights 3 and 4 will have the Wandering Monk. Battles get harder as the nights progress, so expect to see easier ghosts switched out with tougher spirits. This is where the camera obscura comes into play. You will always know you're in the vicinity of a puzzle element or ghost, hostile and non, which tangent the non-aggressive ghosts act as both spooks and a bread trail uncovering the secrets of the Himuro land, as the little flash bulb in the bottom right of the screen, or top of the viewfinder when looking through it, will glow. Blue for stationary non-hostile ghosts and puzzles, orange for moving non-hostile ghosts and enemies. Outside of the camera, most stationary ghosts and puzzles produce static noise to clue you into their location, while the moving sorts project noise from where they are. Headphones are a godsend for this game, as you can pinpoint exact locations for everything by sound alone, and it's not like a majority of ghosts are going to stand still and let you exercise them. While I won't be able to break down each ghost pattern, as all the spirits have a unique approach to attacking you, they all follow a general rule set. Most like to move about, making snapping them harder, and they can also teleport and phase out. Teleporting is exactly what it sounds. Instead of positioning themselves to a new location, they warp there. Most of the time it is either out of your view or right behind you. Phasing is when the ghost goes temporarily incorporeal, making them invulnerable to damage as well as preventing the camera obscura from gaining charge. The intervals at which each ghost does either option is different for most, though all except for a few that have ranged attacks will try to put you into a bear hug for damage. Taking damage is hard to quantify. Befitting the Tecmo nature of the game, getting hit in Fatal Frame means losing a lot of health, but at what rate can be haphazard. Sometimes the most basic of ghosts can hit for half health in one grab, other times it's a love bite, and the stronger haunts are subject to this as well. I never understood what quantified how much damage I took, and evasion is mostly out of the question. You have to stand and fight when a ghost appears, and Miku's sluggish movement means when a ghostie is on top of you, prepared to get hugged. Repositioning has mixed results, as running away to an opposing corner of a room when the ghost hasn't reached you works, but the same can't be said when they're breathing down your neck. Granted, you aren't defenseless, as the camera obscura can banish ghosts. Whenever you see that the flash bulb is yellow, pull up the camera and prepare to get hunting. Side note, while left stick is move and right slightly shifts the room's camera when out of the viewfinder, right stick moves Miku while left the camera's viewfinder when looking through it. Dealing damage to a ghost is as simple as lining up a shot within the center reticle of the obscura and clicking the shutter, but doing only this will barely hurt whoever you're snapshotting. Instead, the camera obscura has a built-in charge feature that strengthens your film the longer you have a ghost in focus. More charge equals more damage, and the only difference between the film types mentioned earlier is their starting charge amount. Type 14 and 90 both hit the same at max charge, but while 14 starts off with none, half the gauge is already filled with 90. How much starting gauge you want is up to you, as you will always have unlimited 14 due to the very nature of the game's puzzle solving. But there's also another way to deal increased damage to a ghost: landing a shutter chance shot. While normally the camera obscura's effective range glows blue when a ghost is in focus, at times it will change to yellow with the charge gauge becoming red to indicate that a shutter chance shot is possible. Coincidentally, shutter chances always happen when a ghost goes to attack. Off of these shutter chance shots, there are also a few other special shots like close, core, and zero. Close is when you take a photo when the ghost is up in your grill. Core happens when you center the ghost's face in the viewfinder's frame, i.e. the crosshair, and zero is when you take a pic only when the capture circle is orange. While all are important, zero shots are your best line of defense as they always knock ghosts back, yet outside of damage, all these shots award more points when taken. Points are used to upgrade the Obscura, its effective range, charge time, and charge amount, I.E, accuracy, rate of fire, and damage, as well as unlock the alternate features of the camera. These are the Spirit Stone consuming function shots, separated into 5. Paralyze, See, Pressure, Slow, and Search. Like with using the camera itself, the ghost needs to be in the effective range of the viewfinder to be hit with a function shot, but they use a different button from the regular shutter. Paralyze stuns ghosts for a brief period of time, allowing the bind shot to be taken. Pressure pushes them back. Slow slows them down. Search auto-targets, and See highlights snapped ghosts. All of them have utility besides search, but because Spirit Stones are limited, function shots are supplementary and don't overtake basic camera handling. Upgrading the camera overall takes priority over function shots, meaning there is high risk, high reward to fighting ghosts. Dying without a stone mirror sends you back to the title screen where you must load a save, though that only happened to me once. There's New Game Plus as well as a battle mode unlocked after you finish the game for the first time, and there is a Resident Evil styled ranking system for each run of the game. Lastly, there is an album feature for Fatal Frame. Each picture you take gets uploaded to a digital album on the memory card for your viewing pleasure, and that's how you learn the names of the ghosts. There is limited space, as in newer photos will replace older ones, but you can save which ones you want to keep. Can I splurge about how much I love the camera system? I'm going to whether you want me or not. On the technical front, Fatal Frame is far more skill-based than its brethren, becoming almost like a character action kinda survival horror game. Let me break down fights in Resident Evil and Silent Hill. There are 2 options: fight and run away. Former with former and ladder with ladder, as ammo is plenty in Resident Evil while combat is awkward in Silent Hill. Strategy is barely a factor outside of not wasting ammo and maneuvering around threats. I can count on one hand how many fights in Resident Evil and Silent Hill aren't shoot at it until it dies. That's where the resource management comes into place, as in both stalwarts of the horror genre, you're in it for the long haul. Fatal Frame is the same way, it's still survival horror after all, but where it differs is your performance in fights. Battling ghosts is inevitable. Run as fast as you can, they'll catch you, they're the gingerbread men. Not only does this add a layer of danger to exploration, again, you can avoid enemies to grab items in Resident Hill while in Frame you can't, it means each encounter has extra weight to it all because of the score system. To get a better camera with more functions, you have to prove you know how to use one. That means labbing out ghost patterns, learning correct spacing, experimenting with different films and function shots, and understanding when to lure a spirit out of a disadvantageous room into a better one is the bread and butter of Fatal Frame. Ammo, as mentioned in gameplay, doesn't work like a traditional game. All film types deal the same damage at max charge. It's all about the starting amount and how much you want to have, plus your own skill with the Obscura. While knife pistol runs in Resident Evil are a thing, it's mostly a self-imposed challenge. Why you use weaker weapons in either previously mentioned series is mostly to save up for when a larger gun is needed. Use the handgun to cripple zombies, the shotgun for lickers would be my example for Reimagined 2. Since all film hits the same across the full charge board, you have a bit more leeway with how you approach encounters in frame. You're not getting pushed in because you have the wrong film, you just generally suck at shooting ghosts then. This opens up into its own flowchart as landing shutter chances and zero shots excise the ghosts more and award more points, but fitting in core and close shots on top of that grants the most amount of bang for your buck. Yet to do so is to understand your opponent inside and out. Some, like Broken Neck and Shrine Maiden, are extremely easy to photograph, having either lackadaisical movement speed or easily readable moves, but for some like Blind Demon or Yae, you have to put out feelers to get a grasp of how they operate. For as overplayed as Blind Demon can be, she's fought a total of 7 times within Night 2, she really highlights how the ghosts are their own. She's the only spirit to operate on sound, with any movement from the player alerting her leading into an attack attempt. So playing still can have its own benefits, but ditto can be said for ballsy shooting. Blind Demon has the tendency to teleport behind you for her attacks after she catches whiff of your presence, meaning while she's on the prowl looking for you, she's also at her most vulnerable. That's an instant close shot plus 0 and maybe even core if you prepped beforehand. Add in a function shot like say paralysis or slow and the window for point scoring becomes even wider as the shutter chance frames either become paused or last longer. Learning the secret to each ghost is such a massive selling point to me as it practically screams that every battle will be demonstrably distinct. Crawling Girl fights differently from Takemine, who fights differently from Floating Face, etc, etc. Only the previously mentioned and female head have the same moveset, but how they act on it differs, with Floating Face slowly but ever surely flying towards you, while the female head barrels towards your position. It all culminates with Kyrie, who can only be damaged via a shutter chance, testing your skills as she attempts to upend your shots with earthquakes. Performing well leads back into itself as you can upgrade the Obscura so that stats are better so you have an easier time landing full charge 0 shots. To continue with my praise of the residents of Himuro, all of them tell a tale visually, informing us of their previous life or how they act currently as a vengeful spirit. You can gather quite a bit of background from designs alone, like the snatching tendencies of Long Arms because of his, long arms, and that the priests all have their vanish ability because their heads were cut off. Little details like that make even the most basic of threats something special, and while I could go over the sound again, you heard me in the presentation, the Himuro Manor is rife with undeath, each little squeak of a floorboard and moan from a ghost enriching the world of Fatal Frame to a horror high. I wasn't overtly scared by Fatal Frame, but in the same manner that Silent Hill terrifies me, Fatal Frame captures that perfect sense of isolation. There is no safe place within the manor, and a ghost could be anywhere waiting to spring on you. That feeling of dread only escalates as the nights progress. Marinating in your own helplessness with the only direction being forward is my cup of tea, as you have to face the unknown head on to hopefully escape, unaware of what else lies in wait. Night 3. Holy hell, Night 3. This sure becomes a Tecmo game by that point, and not in the fun way. There's nothing wrong with a bit of challenge. I do love me some Ninja Gaiden Black, and that game can ream you within an inch of your life. The problem comes when enemies aren't designed with the player's moveset in mind, as that's what it feels like when going up against Lord Himuro and his 4 priestly friends, or are in such a cramped area that taking damage is inevitable. Ghosts acting erratic isn't the issue here. That's part of the challenge with Fatal Frame, even if I think some have taken too many cups of coffee, I.E. the monk. Is when damage seems damn near unavoidable because your only means of avoidance, when taking a picture just isn't feasible, is the equivalent of a snail's sprint and there's no room to maneuver. You get a taste of this in Night 1 within the fish room, as the assistant's patterns are hard to read and the room itself grants only a smidgen of ground to work with, but it really comes to a head with Lord Himuro. He's one of only a few ghosts that can attack in rapid succession, and even then the monk and priest can only repeatedly strike you with fireballs. Himuro pulls off combos that Hayabusa would be proud of. And once he starts swinging, that's 3 meaty cuts for your deceptively short health bar. I never found a way to avoid his barrage besides not letting him do it, which requires hitting him with a zero shot, its own can of worms as Himuro loves to fade in and out. He's one of a few fights that is worthy of using C, mostly because you can circumvent some of his abilities. Hope you saved those spirit stones up as you excise them twice. Meanwhile, the Gang of Four, while not as hyper-aggressive as Himuro, do retain some of their lord's trickery, such as the repeated phasing. New to them, they can remove their heads, rendering them invulnerable for a set period of time, leaving you with a thumb up the ass, as all you can do is put distance between yourself and nearly headless Nick. Special mention goes out to the priest of the square garden, as like Himuro in the Grand Hall, you're more cramped than a dehydrated sardine running back. Granted, at least the priests and even Himuro can be damaged reliably with full charges. The wandering monk can eat my gelatinous filament with a side of fuck off, with a mandatory encounter beside the long-haired woman in the fish room that is the hardest fight in the game if you decide to aggro both instead of luring them away one by one. The wandering monk is one of these set random encounters all throughout nights 3 and 4, and trust me, when he shows up, you wish he wouldn't. His only gimmick besides hitting harder than the average affair is that he shuffles all around while phasing. Cue a frustrating duo of battles where I spent more time stewing in salty discomfort than terror. He exists to eat into your spirit stones, as paralysis or slow are the only ways to pin him down, and remember, he's random. That means what rooms he can appear in are practically any besides a few set ones. Have fun trying to pinpoint the bastard in, say, the entrance hall. The monk's attacks are equally as erratic as his movement, so hitting that shutter chance with any oomph behind it just isn't worth it. Speed shoot him and be done with the coke fiend. What sweet irony that all who I've mentioned above are decidedly more difficult than the final boss, whose other gimmick includes regenerating health. What weird balance is that? On a less ghostly front, the number lock puzzles are a wee bit wank, as there's nothing in-game that tells you what is what. You either understand Japanese and know that the numbers are listed from 0 to 9 in counterclockwise order, or you look up a guide. This is a PlayStation 2 exclusive issue, as the Xbox remaster changes the numbering scheme to clockwise and replaces the Japanese with Arabic so that it's easier to read. Lastly, my mind never wrapped around the camera controls. This is a personal gripe as with the rest of this tab, but having the left stick move the viewfinder and the right one Miku seems backwards. Every other FPS I've played on controller still uses the right stick to aim. This isn't even a case of it would take away from the fumbly bumbly. I still have to snap a ghost as it's whizzing around while letting it get close so I can hurt it more. Switching the sticks added nothing to the play experience, and I don't think there's an in-game option to prevent this, or if there is, I didn't find it. I had an enjoyable experience with my first Fatal Frame game. The whole camera system I dig, as it rewards high-risk actions like letting ghosts get closer, fully charging your film with big damage and higher score, and the whole aesthetic of the game I vibe with. Creepy, run-down rural mansions are my jam, and the sound work of this game is especially phenomenal, tying hard into the gameplay. Each ghost is also wonderfully designed and thoughtful in their mannerisms, leading to each encounter having its own trappings. There are a few missteps, a bit of the old counterintuitive controls here, some unfun fights there, and the number lock puzzles having some of the oddest design I've seen, but none that damper the overall play experience. Due to my findings of backwards compatibility coming up inconclusive, emulating is probably the way to go, though I can only say that about the PlayStation 2 version, as I don't really know about Xbox emulating. Breaking in Halloween pretty fast and hard. Here's hoping I can get the other planned video out before the month is up, otherwise I will be pulling a Dr. Wolfula. October is actually quite busy for me this year, and while I've conversed with members of the inner circle about my plans, putting the cart before the horse has bit me in the ass. Sorry, Oogie's Revenge, I'll get to you next year. And because this is actual news that I can bring up, Let's Talk About finally has a Patreon. Now, you too can give your hard-earned dollars to some random schmuck on the internet in his theater of the bizarre and the abhorrent. Kidding aside, there's only one tier for it, that being pay what you want. Minimum is $1 and you get everything, from early screenings of new LTAs before they hit the mainstream to the actual written script so you can spot any differences within the finalized version of the video to the Patreon exclusive show I'm running called the Showtime Reels. A post-commentary track over the bare footage where I elaborate on any thoughts or ideas I didn't get to in the LTA. Funding the theater also means you get your name in the credits of each LTA and allows me to be more flexible with my schedule. Possibly host a matinee or two, as I do enjoy streaming. Of course, this is entirely optional. You do you. I'm not one to force ideas onto others, and if you don't feel like spending, be my guest. I'm not your dad or mom or crazed uncle that calls you sport because he doesn't know your real name. And on that odd bombshell, that's the end of the video.